The dusty main street of Willow Creek stretched like a brown ribbon under the merciless Arizona sun. Wooden storefronts lined both sides, their paint peeling from years of desert wind and scorching heat. Today, however, the usual quiet of this frontier town had been shattered by an event that would be whispered about for generations. A makeshift platform had been erected outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, and upon it stood the most beautiful woman anyone in Willow Creek had ever seen. Her name was Isabella Rodriguez, though few knew the pain that name carried. At 23, she possessed the kind of beauty that stopped conversations and made hardened cowboys forget their own names. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. Her emerald eyes held depths that spoke of secrets and sorrows. But Isabella wasn't standing on that platform by choice 3 months ago. Her father had died, leaving behind debts that could sink a ship. The bank had foreclosed on their small ranch, and the vultures had circled quickly. Marcus Thornfield, the town's most powerful and ruthless businessman, had bought her father's debts for pennies on the dollar. Now he stood beside the platform, his thin lips curved in a smile that never reached his cold gray eyes. "Gentlemen," Thornfield called out, his voice carrying over the crowd of rough men who had gathered. "Today we have something special." Isabella Rodriguez, pure as the driven snow, beautiful as a desert sunset. The bidding starts at $100. Isabella's hands trembled as she fought back tears. The white dress they had forced her to wear felt like a burial shroud. She scanned the crowd desperately, searching for a friendly face, a way out. Anything that might save her from this nightmare. That's when she saw him. Samuel Mackenzie stood. At the back of the crowd, his weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. Even from a distance, Isabella could see the pain in his face, the same pain that had lived in her heart for 3 long years. Sam was 31 now, his once smooth face marked by wind and worry, his broad shoulders carrying burdens that would break lesser men. Their eyes met across the crowd, and time seemed to freeze. 3 years melted away in an instant, taking them back to stolen moments under the cottonwood trees, to whispered promises and dreams of a future together. But that future had been torn apart by war and pride and the cruel hand of fate. 3 years earlier, Isabella had been 20, fresh-faced and full of hope, working as a schoolteacher in the small classroom behind the church. Sam had been the town's deputy sheriff, young and idealistic, believing he could make a difference in this harsh land. They had met during the harvest festival, when Sam had helped her down from her father's wagon. It was the touch of his calloused hand on hers had sent lightning through her veins, and when he smiled, really smiled, not the polite nod he gave most folks, she had felt her world shift on its axis. For 6 beautiful months, they had courted properly. Sam would walk her home from school carrying her books and listening to her dreams of bringing education to the frontier children. They would sit on her father's porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, while the desert sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I'm going to build us a house," Sam had told her one evening, his voice thick with emotion. "Up on the hill overlooking the valley, you'll be able to see for miles in every direction." "And what will we fill this house with?" Isabella had teased, though her heart was racing. "Love," he had said simply, "and children and laughter. The things this hard country tries to steal from people." He had proposed on Christmas Eve, 1871, getting down on one knee in the snow outside the church after midnight service. The ring had been his grandmother's, a simple silver band with a small diamond that caught the starlight like a promise. Isabella had said yes, without hesitation, throwing her arms around his neck as the church bells rang out across the desert, announcing the birth of another Christmas and the beginning of their new life together. But 3 weeks later, everything had changed. The telegram had arrived on a bitter January morning. Sam's younger brother Daniel, barely 19, had been killed in a mining accident up in Colorado. Sam's sister-in-law Mary was left alone with baby Thomas, who was not yet 2 years old. "I have to go to them," Sam had told Isabella, his face grave with responsibility. "Mary can't handle the mine and the baby alone. Daniel left debts, and there are men who would take advantage of a widow." "Then I'll come with you," Isabella had said immediately. Sam had shaken his head. "Mines. No place for a lady," It's rough country, rougher than here. Mary. She's not herself since Daniel died. She needs time to grieve without worrying about what folks might think of us living under the same roof before we're married. Then let's marry now, Isabella had urged. You can have the ceremony tomorrow, and I'll come as your wife. Again, Sam had shaken his head. You deserve better than a rushed wedding. You deserve the dress and the flowers and all the things you've dreamed about. I'll get things settled in Colorado, sell the mine, and be back in 6 months. We'll have our wedding in June, just like we planned. Isabella had wanted to argue, to insist that she didn't need a fancy wedding, that all she needed was him. She had seen the determination in his eyes, the weight of family obligation that was as much a part of him as his strong hands and gentle heart. So she had let him go. The first few months had been filled with letters. Sam wrote about the chaos he had found in Colorado, the mine barely functional, Mary deep in grief, little Thomas sick and crying. He wrote about the men who circled like vultures, trying to cheat Mary out of what little Daniel had left behind. It's worse than I thought, one letter had said. The mine has promise, but it needs work and money we don't have. Mary won't hear. Of selling it, she says it's all she has left of Daniel. I'm doing what I can, but it's slow going. Please be patient with me, my darling. I know this isn't what we've planned, but family has to come first. Isabella had understood. She had admired Sam's loyalty to his family, even as she missed him desperately. She had thrown herself into her teaching, working extra hours to help the children of Willow Creek learn to read and write and dream of better things. But then the letters had stopped coming at first. Isabella had told herself that the mountain passes were snowed in, that the mail couldn't get through. Spring came, and still no word. She wrote letter after letter, but received no replies. Finally, in late May, a letter had arrived. But it wasn't from Sam, Miss Rodriguez. I regret to inform you that my husband will not be returning to Willow Creek. We have decided to make our life here in Colorado, where he is needed. Please do not write again, Mrs. Samuel Mackenzie's the letter had hit Isabella like a physical blow. Mrs. Samuel Mackenzie. He had married Mary. He had married his brother's widow and taken on Daniel's family as his own, leaving Isabella and their dreams behind like yesterday's newspaper. Isabella had locked herself in her room for 3 days, crying until she had no tears left. When she finally emerged, she was a different woman. The bright hope in her eyes had dimmed to a cautious wariness. She continued teaching, but she turned away every suitor who came calling. Her heart belonged to a man who had chosen duty over love, and she couldn't find it in herself to give it to anyone else. Back to the present. 125? Called out a gruff voice from the crowd. Double quotes 1-50, shouted another. Isabella felt sick as the bidding continued around her. These men weren't seeing her as a person, they were seeing her as property, something to be bought and owned. She closed her eyes, trying to block out their leering faces and crude comments. When she opened them again, Sam was pushing through the crowd, his face dark with anger. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice cutting. Through the noise, Marcus Thornfield smiled coldly. "Mr. Mackenzie, I didn't expect to see you back in Willow Creek. This is a legal auction, sanctioned by territorial law. Miss Rodriguez owes substantial debts, and this is the only way to satisfy them." Debts. Sam's voice was deadly quiet. Debts. Her father borrowed heavily against his land before he died. The bank foreclosed, but there were still outstanding obligations. Medical bills, supplies purchased on credit, taxes owed to the territory. It all adds up to nearly $3,000. Isabella saw Sam's jaw clench. $3,000 was more money than most folks in Willow Creek would see in 5 years. Might as well have been $3 million, and you're selling her to pay it. Sam's hand moved instinctively toward his gun belt, but Isabella could. See? He wasn't wearing one. He'd always carried a Colt .45 as deputy, but now his hip was bare. Not selling, Thornfield corrected smoothly. Auctioning her hand in marriage. Perfectly legal. The winning bidder will pay her debts and receive her hand in matrimony. It's quite romantic, really. The crowd snickered at this, but Sam's expression grew even darker. $200? someone called out. 250? 300. Each bid felt like a knife in Isabella's heart. She wanted to run, but Thornfield's men flanked the platform, ensuring she couldn't escape. Her only hope was that the bidding would somehow stop, that someone would intervene. $500.
Ow!
The voice was quiet, but it carried clearly. Across the crowd, every head turned to see who had made such a substantial bid. It was Sam. Isabella's heart leaped, but then reality crashed down on her. Sam was a former deputy sheriff who had been away for 3 years. Even if he had found success in Colorado, $500 was still a fortune for a working man. 500. From Mr. McKenzie, Thornfield announced, his smile faltering slightly. Do I hear 600? 600? Called out Jake Morrison, a wealthy cattle rancher with a reputation for cruelty toward his workers. 700, Sam said immediately. Isabella watched in amazement as Sam continued to bid, matching every offer. Where was he getting this money, and why was he doing this? The letter from Mary had made it clear that he was married, that he had chosen his new family over their love. The bidding climbed steadily. 800. 900. $1,000. 1,500, Sam said, when Morrison bid 1,400. The crowd fell silent. $1,500 was more than most of them would make in 2 years. Morrison scowled and shook his head, stepping back from the bidding. $1 from Mr. Mackenzie, Thornfield announced, but Isabella could hear the frustration in his voice. Do I hear 1,600? The crowd was silent. Even the wealthiest men in town were shaking their heads at such an astronomical sum. Going once, ... going twice, ... $2,000. Every head turned to see who had made this impossible bid. Isabella's heart sank when she saw the speaker. It was Jeremiah Blackwood, the territory's most notorious saloon owner and rumored criminal. Owned establishments in 3 towns and was known to have connections with cattle rustlers and worse. He was also nearly 60 years old, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth that had never spoken a kind word to anyone. 2,000 from Mr. Blackwood, Thornfield announced, his smile returning. Do I hear 2,100? Sam's face had gone pale. Isabella could see him calculating desperately, but she already knew the truth. No honest man could match Blackwood's bid. The criminal had wealth that came from decades of illegal activities, money that most folks couldn't even imagine. Going once, ... double quotes, Thornfield began. Sam's voice was hoarse. I need a moment, Mr. Mackenzie. If you can't match the bid, I said I need a moment. Sam's tone carried the authority of a man who had once worn a badge, and even Thornfield fell silent. Sam pushed through the crowd until he was standing directly in front of the platform. His eyes met Isabella's, and in them she saw all the pain and regret of the past 3 years. Isabella, he said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough for her to hear. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I failed you 3 years ago. But if you'll have me, if you'll give me a chance to explain, ... He pulled something from his poquita small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of gold coins. This is everything I have, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Everything I've saved for 3 years, every penny I've scraped together. It's not enough to outbid Blackwood, but it's all I can offer. Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. She could see the truth written in every line of Sam's weathered features. Whatever had happened 3 years ago, whatever had kept him away, he was here now. He was trying to save her with everything he had. Mr. Mackenzie, Thornfield interrupted impatiently. Do you have a bid or not? Sam looked up at Isabella one more time, his eyes pleading with her to understand, to forgive, to give him another chance. Then he turned to face Thornfield and the crowd. I have a better offer than money, he said loudly, his voice carrying across the square. The crowd murmured with confusion. Thornfield frowned. Mr. Mackenzie, this is a legal auction. You only accept currency. And what if the debt was satisfied? Another way? Sam asked. What if someone were to work off Miss Rodriguez's obligations through labor? Thornfield's frown deepened. What are you proposing? I'm proposing to work for you, Thornfield. It's 3 years of labor, whatever you need done. In exchange, Isabella's debts are forgiven, and she goes free. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. 3 years of unpaid labor was worth far more than $3,000. Everyone knew it. Isabella's heart was pounding. Sam was offering to become Thornfield's virtual slave to free her. The man who had supposedly abandoned her for another woman was willing to sacrifice his freedom for hers, but Thornfield was shaking his head. "I'm not interested in labor, Mackenzie. I want cash payment, and Miss Rodriguez comes as part of the package." The auction continues, going once for $2,000, he announced. That's when Isabella found her voice. "No," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. Thornfield turned to stare at her. "Miss Rodriguez, you have no say in this matter. The debt is legal, and the auction is binding." "The debt may be legal," Isabella said, stepping forward on the platform, "but I am not property to be sold. I am a citizen of the United States of America. Again, no law in this territory gives you the right to auction off my body against my will." Crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "Furthermore," Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I challenge the validity of this debt. My father's will specified that all debts were to be paid from the sale of his property. If there are additional debts beyond what the property could cover, then those debts died with him. You cannot hold me responsible for obligations I never agreed to." Thornfield's face was turning red with anger. The law clearly states that debts are not inheritable unless specifically assumed by the heir." Isabella interrupted. "I never signed any papers assuming my father's debts. This entire auction is illegal." A new voice spoke up from the crowd. "The lady's right." "Yeah." Everyone turned to see Judge William Harrison pushing through the crowd. He was an elderly man with white hair and kind eyes, respected throughout the territory for his fairness and knowledge of the law. "Your Honor," Thornfield began, "surely you're not going to let this woman's desperate lies—" "They're not lies, Thornfield," Judge Harrison said firmly. "I've been listening to these proceedings, and Miss Rodriguez is absolutely correct. Unless she voluntarily assumed her father's debts in writing, she cannot be held responsible for them. This auction is not only illegal, it's criminal. You're essentially attempting to sell a human being into slavery." The crowd began to murmur angrily. Even in the rough frontier territory, slavery was despised and illegal. Thornfield's face was now purple with rage. "Judge Harrison, I have documentation then." "Produce it," the judge said calmly. "Show me Miss Rodriguez's signature on a document assuming these debts." Thornfield fumbled in his coat pocket, pulling out several papers, shuffled through them frantically, his confidence evaporating with each passing second. "Well," Judge Harrison asked, "the debt is still valid." Thornfield insisted desperately. "Her father borrowed the money." "From whom?" Sam asked, stepping closer to the platform. "Show us the original loan documents. Show us proof that the money was actually lent and not simply fabricated to justify this auction." Thornfield's silence was answer enough. The crowd was getting restless now, angry mutters rising from the assembled men. They might be rough and crude, but they understood justice, and what they were witnessing was anything but just. "I think we've seen enough," Judge Harrison announced. "Mr. Thornfield, you will release Miss Rodriguez immediately. If you have legitimate debts to collect, you can pursue them through proper legal channels. This auction is hereby dissolved." Thornfield looked around at the angry faces surrounding him, calculating his options. His men were outnumbered 20-1, and the mood of the crowd was turning dangerous. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he signaled to his men to stand down. Isabella felt her knees go weak with relief. She was free. The nightmare was over, but as the crowd began to disperse, she realized her real challenge was just beginning. Sam was standing at the base of the platform, looking up at her with eyes full of hope and fear. They needed to talk Anne. Hour later, Isabella and Sam sat on a wooden bench outside the church, the place where they had once planned their wedding. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson. "Mary is dead," Sam said quietly, breaking the long silence between them. Isabella felt her heart stop. "What? She died 2 years ago?" "Pneumonia took her during A hard winter. Sam's voice was thick with old pain. I stayed in Colorado to raise Thomas. He's 5 now. But the letter, Isabella began. What letter? Isabella's mind was reeling. The letter she sent me. The one saying you had married her. That you wouldn't be coming back. Sam turned to stare at her, his face pale. Isabella, I never married Mary. I cared for her as my brother's widow. Nothing more. She never would have sent such a letter. She knew about you, knew how much I loved you. She was the one who kept telling me to come back, to stop sacrificing my happiness for hers. The truth hit Isabella like a thunderbolt. Someone had forged that letter, had deliberately destroyed their relationship. Thornfield, she whispered. What? It had to be Thornfield. He's been circling like a vulture for years, trying to get control of my father's land. He knew that as long as I was engaged to you, as long as I had protection, he couldn't touch me. He made sure you stayed away. Sam's hands clenched into fists. That son of a— It doesn't matter now, Isabella interrupted, though her heart was burning with anger at the 3 years they had lost. What matters is that you're here. I came back for you, Sam said simply. Mary died 2 years ago, and I spent the time after that getting my affairs in order, selling the mine, making arrangements for Thomas. I came back to Willow Creek last month, ready to grovel and beg for your forgiveness. But when I got here, I heard about your father's death and the trouble you were in. Where have you been staying? At the old line shack up in the hills. I've been watching the town, trying to figure out how to approach you, how to explain why I stayed away so long. He turned to face her fully. Isabella, I know I failed you. I should have come back sooner, should have written more, should have never let duty come between us. Can you ever forgive me? Isabella felt tears streaming down her face again. But these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of joy, of a love that had never truly died despite 3 years of heartbreak. Oh, Sam, she whispered, reaching out to touch his weathered face. I forgave you the moment I saw you in that crowd. I thought I had lost you forever. He caught her hand in his, pressing it against his cheek. Never. You'll never lose me again. Swear it on my brother's grave. They sat in silence for a moment, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had almost lost and what they had found again. Tell me about Thomas, Isabella said finally. Sam's face lit up with a smile she remembered from their courting days. He's incredible, smart as a whip, curious about everything. Looks just like Daniel did at that age. Same dark hair, same mischievous grin. He's been asking about you. About me? I told him about the woman I loved in Arizona, the school teacher, who was going to be his new mama. He's been practicing his letters so he can write to you. Isabella felt her heart melt. Where's he now? Back in Colorado with Mary's sister. Sarah, she's been helping me care for him, but she has her own family to worry about. I was hoping— Sam's voice trailed off uncertainly. You were hoping what? I was hoping you might come back with me, not just as my wife, but as Thomas's.
Mother.
He needs a woman's touch. Someone who can teach him and love him and help him grow into the man his father would have wanted him to be. Isabella felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. Sam wasn't just offering her his heart, he was offering her a ready-made family, a chance to be the mother she had always dreamed of being. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll come to Colorado. Yes, I'll be Thomas's mother. She stood up, pulling Sam to his feet with her. Yes, to all of it. Sam Mackenzie. Yes to the life we should have had 3 years ago. Sam swept her into his arms, spinning her around as the last rays of sunlight painted the desert in shades of gold. When he set her down, his eyes were shining with tears of joy. When he asked, "Tomorrow," Isabella said, without hesitation, "I don't want to wait another day. We've lost too much time already. Judge Harrison could marry us," Sam suggested. "He owes us a favor after today." Isabella laughed, the sound bright and clear in the evening air. "Perfect, and then we can start our new life. All 3 of us." Sam cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I love you, Isabella Rodriguez. I've loved you for 3 years and 3,000 miles, and I'll love you until the day I die. I love you too, Samuel Mackenzie. I can't wait to meet our son." When Sam kissed her, Isabella felt the last pieces of her broken heart click back into place. The desert sunset blazed around them, painting the sky in colors that spoke of new beginnings and second chances. Tomorrow, they would be married. Next week, they would travel to Colorado to begin their new life. But tonight, they had each other. That was enough. 1 year later, Isabella stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching Sam teach Thomas how to carve a wooden horse. The Colorado mountains rose majestically around their small ranch there, peaks still capped with snow, despite the warm spring weather. "Mama Bella, look," Thomas called out, holding up his carving. "Papa taught me how to make the ears." "Beautiful, sweetheart," Isabella replied, her hand unconsciously moving too. "Rest on her rounded belly. Your papa is a very good teacher." Sam looked up and smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying a baby buffalo?" Isabella laughed. "But happy. So very happy." Their child was due in 3 months, and Isabella could hardly contain her excitement. Thomas was thrilled at the prospect of being a big brother, and Sam had already started building a cradle from mountain pine. They had been married for almost a year now, and Isabella had never known such contentment. Their ranch was small, but prosperous, their love stronger than ever. Their family was growing. Thomas had taken to calling her Mama Bella almost from the first day, and Isabella's heart still fluttered every time she heard it. She had never borne a child, but she loved Thomas as fiercely as if she had carried him herself. "Will you tell me the story again?" Thomas asked, as Isabella joined them on the porch. "About how Papa saved you from the bad man?" Isabella smiled, and settled into her rocking chair, Sam's hand finding hers as Thomas climbed onto her lap. Well, she began. "It was a very hot day in Arizona, and your papa was the bravest man in the whole territory. ... As she told the familiar story, Isabella felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought them all together. Marcus Thornfield's greed and deception had cost them 3 years. But in the end, it had also brought them Thomas and led them to this beautiful life in the mountains. Love, she had learned, was worth fighting for. It was worth waiting for, and it was worth every sacrifice along the way. As the Colorado sunset painted the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Isabella squeezed Sam's hand and smiled at their son. They had lost 3 years, but they had gained forever, and that was more than enough.